button. James, there's rumors everywhere. What's going on, man?
Not a whole lot. George Carl once called me an a-hole.
He did.
Oh,
I
well,
did.
He
Yep,
did.
he did.
Yeah, he
then that
did.
was uncalled for.
No,
That
it
that
was.
was yeah.
And your response was what?
Um, yeah, I've been called an a-hole by a much better person than you, George. Because he asked me if I was all right afterwards. Like, yeah, I'm all right, George. I've been called that by a much better person than you. So we're all good, man. Move along.
So let's start backwards. We were just talking about the whole reason we got on this is because Victor Wembanyama said he's playing in summer
Playing in
league,
summer league, yeah.
and we were trying to convince him here on the show to play in Sacramento
Mhm.
on July 3rd on that Monday. You think he's going to play here? I got a feeling he might play here.
I think either way he'll be here. Like I made sure like when the tickets came out for sale, my son's like, "Oh, I'm going to go." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine." So him and his buddies, he decided to buy 5 tickets and I'm like, "Okay, where do you want to sit?" He's like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "You could get like 6 rows behind the visitors bench just in case Victor Wembanyama's here." And he's like, "Oh, let's do it." So he paid extra out of his own money. I think he'll be here, and I think there's a good chance that he'll suit up and he'll play. It's possible he won't, but I think that they want to get the ball rolling on this kid's career, and they want to test him. They want to make sure that he's going to hold up. And one of the best ways to do that is to throw him into the fire, see how he handles it, see what kind of shape he's in, and then go from there. I mean, he's played a lot of basketball, but I definitely think there's a good possibility that he'll play. And if not, I do expect like that 7'4" string being to walk in the door and be in Golden One Center.
But Windhorse was on that Simmons podcast today, and they had a whole thing on Victor Wembanyama, and he said, "I can tell you right now, he is not going to play every game. He's going to play, what's it, 65 to win Rookie of the Year? He might play 65. But every opportunity they have to like not play him, and he didn't say it like complete low manage, but he's not going to play every night." And that's interesting. So that's the one thing that gives me pause. Well, why I thought he might not play in summer league, which was I was surprised when he said he was, because it feels like if he doesn't have to play, then they're not gonna force him to play.
Victor, I said that there's going to be 16,000 people there.
Yeah. It's a more intimate setting than Thomas and Mack Center,
which is we learned is 19,000. It's also not 40 years old either.
Well, Thomas and Mack is okay. It's not a bad gym. Is it Cox Pavilion right next door?
Yeah.
That is tiny.
That's a high school gym.
Yeah. It's claustrophobic.
David Patrick, like, I'm not playing in that.
Yeah.
Coach David Patrick, like, I ain't playing in there.
Yeah, I think Victor Wembanyama can reach sideways and touch the wall on both sides.
Facts.
In Cox Center. Yeah.
Yeah, that's accurate. What do you think? Not Kings related. What do you think of this Porzingis to the Celtics thing?
Better you than me. I mean, that's
you do not like Kristaps Porzingis.
Well, that's just how I always feel. Like he's injury prone. Like there's a bad aura around the dude with his peeps, and his story isn't great, and so I don't know. I just think that he's one of those players that always looks intriguing, and then if you squint, you can see how he would fit next to De'Aaron Fox, or you can see how he would fit next to Domantas Sabonis, and do a twin tower thing. And then the reality of it though is he's going to miss 25 to 30 games, and when he is healthy, you're not sure if he's really that functionally good. He certainly can put up numbers, but I don't know that his numbers equate to victories and stuff like that. So I think it's an interesting deal. I like Malcolm Brogdon going to the Clippers, and I think that throws like a wrench in a bunch of other people's ideas. So yeah, I definitely think we're going to see like this is the beginning. Like this is going to be a wild couple of like 10 days. And I thought we would be here, but I think the new CBA has enough rule changes in it that people are trying to get things done before that, and to make sure that they know all of what they can do right now, because that's the rules they played with for so long, and they're going to push forward like that.
I like KP. I like Porzingis more than others. And also in a situation like this, you look at him as a guy that is going to be your third or fourth best player. And he's fine there. If you want him to lead your franchise or be your second best player, those were those concerns, the injury concerns, the decision making on and off the court concerns come into play. I completely understand that, but if he's the third or fourth best player, I think you can do just fine with Porzingis. I think that's a good deal for Boston.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for Boston specifically, it might work out. But like, where does he fit there? Tatum's your power forward. That team is like 100 times better when Robert Williams is on the court. Whatever they do, it doesn't matter. The second he steps off the court, they usually have trouble. So I don't know. It's a bold move, and that's what happens when you don't make it to the NBA Finals when you're expected to. But I think Boston is kind of in a situation where they have to take a big swing, and that's one of those swings where I just think long term, how does it really help you? And we'll have to see. But it might not help them at all. At least some big body that can score. But I'm kind of just like, meh. It to me, that's like a middle of the road NBA transaction at this point.
Well, let's get to the Kings, James. We can't get anything confirmed, but they're mixed in rumors all over the place. Their pursuit of OG Anunoby wasn't enough. Pascal Siakam's name has been thrown in it. Why not add Tobias Harris to this joint? I think you started that rumor, by the way. You're a Tobias Harris guy. I think that one came. I think someone was listening to an old edition of the James Ham show, and we're like, you know what? Let's just throw a Tobias Harris rumor out there.
Last year, like
2 years ago. Yeah. Go ahead.
But the King's name is out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like, again, it's the modus operandi of this front office. They like for their name to be out there all over the place. I don't buy most of it. I think the Kings would love to have either OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam. That the conversation today where that was brought up with Chris Haynes, he said, so that changed things a lot. Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. I don't know that he truly meant like both of them coming to Sacramento, because to me, like, that is like really crazy and intriguing and would cost you a lot. But at the end of the day, like, why not? If you're going to go for it, go for it. I like that move a lot better than like trading everything for one Bradley Beal. But at the end of the day, like, look, this is where we're at in the rumor season. And it's going to keep bubbling and it's going to keep going crazy like this until we get to like July 10th and everything's kind of settled down and over. And for right now, I think it's fun. I think it's interesting. And like, there's a lot going on. And the Kings still have to make major decisions about how they want to structurally proceed through this offseason. Are they going to be a team that makes a big trade? Are they going to be a true cap space team? Are they going to be a team that uses like their mid-level and their biannual exception and tries to hold on to players like Harrison Barnes? There's a lot that has to be figured out here.
Let's just have a good time here. We're just talking on the radio. Who would you rather have, Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby for the Kings?
It's tough because Siakam has developed into a really good passer over the last couple of years. And I could see a way in which you start the two next to each other as far as Sabonis and Siakam. And then when you pull Sabonis off the floor, Siakam takes over as the primary distributor that Sabonis has been. So I really like Siakam. Like, as far as ceiling, he's not as good a defender, but he does check a lot of the boxes that the Kings need. And but like OG Anunoby is still like one of my favorite targets, and a lot of it's because of his age. Like, he's almost 26. He fits perfectly into what the Kings are doing. He fits their biggest positional need The fact that he can play the 3 or the 4 is big, but the fact that he can probably even play the 2, you know, is 6'7", but he's a rangy defender who can defend just about anyone in the league. So I like him, and I also like his contract is half of what Siakam's is, so it makes it easier to acquire. But on top of that, he has a player option, and there's some other things at play here, right? And so retaining him might be easier, locking him up long term. Siakam is in the final year of like a $37-38 million contract. And so like taking on both would be crazy because you can't actually negotiate an extension. You can, but like I think all they can get in extend and trade is 5%. That might work for Siakam to get a 5% raise off his $37 million bucks. But for OG Anunoby, that's not going to work. And so you have to wait 6 months until you can actually negotiate an extension with them once you trade for him. So you would still have time, you know, basically in late December or early January, you would have time to go and try to negotiate a contract extension with these guys. And if you weren't able to get something done, you could look at the trade deadline and say, okay, this has gone the wrong way. How do we figure this situation out? And so there's a lot of ways in which, again, the Kings could fit one or both, or you know, and into their system. And I think part of that's too because Keegan can play either the 3 or the 4.
Yeah, that's true.
Hammer, when we first got this OG story last week, I allowed myself to get really excited about it, and then became confident. Like, given some other things that we had heard, like, I think this might get done. I've lost a lot of that confidence, James. I've lost a lot of that confidence, and I'm speaking just about OG Anunoby, not Pascal Siakam or anything along those lines. How do you feel about them? Where's your confidence level on them pulling a deal over the course of? I don't think this has a draft day deadline, particularly the OG Anunoby deal. I don't think this has a draft day deadline at all, but I do think it might have a next Friday start a free agency deadline. Where's your confidence level on the Kings making a deal along those lines?
Yeah, see, it's tough. I hate putting a number or anything on it like that because at the end of the day, like it kind of goes back to the Sasha deal, right? Sasha couldn't be 90% coming to Sacramento, but that 10% is completely out of the Kings' control. That's him saying whether or not he wants to leave the comforts of Greece, being a superstar in Greece, and go play in the NBA. And that's tough. It's tough to say goodbye to your family. It's tough to say goodbye to your fans. It's tough to say goodbye to the team and everything while you're winning and all that. So when it comes to OG Anunoby, like if the Kings could just like package something and give it for him right now, they likely would. But it's always going to come down to very specifically whether the Toronto Raptors want to play ball or not. And they're not in a similar situation to the Kings because the Kings have options just on how they want to proceed, how they want to go forward with some structural things. Like the Toronto Raptors have to decide if they're going to blow it up or start building around a younger player like Scotty Barnes, or if they're going to try to push forward one more time. And I think the Fred VanVleet situation is part of this conversation. I think the Gary Trent piece is part of this conversation. But how do they get better? How do they move forward? And I'm not sure that they can. Like they're starting over. They just got a new coach. They've got a new system in place. So I would I think it's possible that this deal does get done, but it really is at the last second. Toronto is going to say, yes, we've decided that we want to trade him. And then when you bring up whether it's going to get done by draft night or whether it's a couple of days later, you have to kind of tie all that together, because if you're going to get a deal done, there's a good chance that the 24th pick is going to be something that you're going to offer up in a trade. And it wouldn't be the pick as much as it would be the player that comes with the pick. And Toronto would want to make that selection. It wouldn't be something like the Kings just choose a random guy and then hope that Toronto wants him. So that's one of the few trade chips that the Kings have that are now to help build. And you got to remember, we go back to the Scotty Barnes situation. Scotty Barnes, like 21 years old. Like, you'd want to get players that are around his age. You wouldn't want to wait until the 2026 or 28 draft to start accumulating draft capital to go with him. you'd want to do it sooner rather than later. And you'd want to do it now, and you'd want to get more for later. But it depends on if Toronto presses the nuclear button here and ends this thing.
James, you're correct. Ideally, usually these teams want the pick so they can make their own pick. But recently, we were talking about the other day, we've seen these trades happen after the draft, where the both the Minnesota Rudy Gobert deal was after the draft, and Utah decided they wanted Walker Kessler, and he was part of that deal. And Cleveland had already drafted Abaji in the Utah deal with Donovan Mitchell, and Utah decided, okay, we'll take Abaji, and he was part of that deal as well. So generally, yeah, like that's, you just want the pick, but maybe if it doesn't happen till after the draft, it could still be getting worked out.
Well, I would say the difference in this situation is that the Kings can't trade 24 or 25 or right now 26. They can put a rider in that they could potentially trade 26, but they can't trade 27, and they can trade 28. They can trade 29. They can trade 30. They can't trade all three of them. They can trade 28 and 30, or they can trade 29. So the reason I bring this up is because the only asset the Kings have that's immediate as far as draft, where Minnesota had not only Walker Kessler, but they also had their pick the next year, the pick 2 years later, the pick 4 years later, the pick 6 years later. So they were able to package all that stuff up. And that's immediate draft capital, where the Kings don't have that ability right now to offer something. And that's where you start looking at the Scotty Barnes age thing. You want to get players that are young and that are going to grow with Scotty if you're resetting that thing. And that's one of the issues that I would have.
And yeah, my concern isn't the draft at all, though I take your point very seriously. I think it more boils down to the start of free agency the following Friday, especially if we're talking OG Anunoby, because I don't see a situation where it's OG Anunoby and Harrison Barnes. I see a situation where it's OG Anunoby or Harrison Barnes. And if Toronto is holding on to this deal for whatever they want to, I think the Sacramento Kings have to move forward. And maybe it's not Harrison. I think it's Harrison, but I think you have to move forward with whatever your plan is for that position. And you can't let Toronto hold you hostage in this.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. Like this NBA build up to the draft and to free agency, it feels a little like what I'm watching with European soccer. Like there's so many rumors, and most of them have no validity at all. And so you're just sitting there like, what exactly is going to happen here? Like, look, I think we've heard enough. Like I've heard enough behind the scenes that, we know a roundabout number of what Harrison Barnes is looking for. We also know that, like I brought this up before, and we're still going to play in this pool a little bit. There's potential for the Sacramento Kings to carve out enough cap space to go to Domantas Sabonis and see if they can raise his salary this summer and extend him. And that's a potential, situation that the Kings have to deal with. I've got them. Go ahead.
Before you, there's a lot of people watching, a lot of people listening. We've talked about this before, but can you outline that for us again? What extension for Harrison this season would look like?
Okay, well, not for Harrison.
I'm sorry I'm only talking about Harrison Barnes today. For Domantas Sabonis.
Yeah. So Domantas Sabonis came into when the Kings traded for him. His salary for this season was $19.4 million, but he had two like somewhat obtainable bonuses in his contract, and both of them for $1.3 million. One was to make the All-Star team, which he did. One was to make All NBA, which he did. So his salary for next season is $22 million. So between him and Fox having a little bump in their salary, the Kings are actually from all of my research and everything else, they're right about, I want to say right about $20 million under the cap as we sit right now. If they become a true cap team where they give up their hold on Harrison Barnes, they give up, they basically waive all of the their Larry Bird rights to guys like Alex Lynn, Terrence Davis, Chimezie Metu, all that stuff, right? They're going to be between like 20 and 22 million. That can go up a little bit. And then they got a little bit of a reprieve today when the salary cap actually came back 2 million higher than what they thought it was going to be. So the salary cap now for this coming season is 136 million as opposed to 134. Now, if you're a true cap space team, you can take your salary and you can actually offer it to one of your players as a raise. You can rate well, you cannot negotiate a salary down in the NBA. So if someone makes 10 million bucks, they make 10 million bucks. You cannot go to them and say, "Hey, can we get you to take 5 million this year because you weren't very good or because we want to go sign these other players." But what you can do is you can give them more money. And then in the new collective bargaining agreement, come July 1st, when it triggers, there is a way to extend your own players for 140% of their current salary. So pretty basic. If you were to extend like just at his $22 million, you were to ask Sabonis, hey, will you take the 140% and we'll give you an extension? He's going to say no, because that's around like 117 or 120 million bucks, maybe a little bit more than that because of the raises. But if you can add $5 million to his salary for this season, then again, his extension would be based off this 140% number. And so you could give him a deal if you take 5 million and add it to his 22 and give him 27 million this year, then his starting salary for an extension the following year would be 37.8 million bucks, and you can go up to a 4-year deal would be around 170 million. If you give him 8 million and push his salary up to 30, you could pay him 189 million over 4 years. And that's a lot of money. Because we're looking at like, if you were to give him 30 million, we're talking 42, 45, 49, and 53 million. Those are the 3 years. But basically next year, whatever he makes would be either like in this scenario, would be like 27 or 20 or 30, whatever it is, that counts towards your cap this year. And so you have to have cap space to do whatever it is I'm talking about. And so it becomes difficult to figure out how you fit a guy like Harrison Barnes. So if you get Harrison Barnes at 5 million and you got 23 million bucks in cap space, that might give you 7 million to work with Sabonis to give him this extension. And then you'd eat up all of the rest of your cap space and you'd have a difficult time going out and adding more players, but you would still have something like the room exception. So I'm just saying there is a possibility that the Kings venture into this ground with Sabonis because it would make a lot of sense. And then if somehow you can get someone to take Richaun Holmes off your hands, say you give up 3 or 4 second-round picks for someone to take his 25 million over the next 2 years off your hands, now you can get some more cap relief. You could get up to like, again, like 34, 35 million bucks in cap space. And it would make it easier for you to go out and do a bunch of transactions. But for right now, like it would be a smart move for the Kings to try to clear up some cap space and use it to get Sabonis in here long term, and then it just makes life easier. And then you could do something like trade again. I just for numbers' sake, because we've done this before. But if you were to package Richaun Holmes and you were to package Davion Mitchell for OG Anunoby and then a bunch of picks, that's almost a straight salary swap. So now you're talking about having OG and then having like 21, 22 million bucks in cap space. And that's a lot of money to play with. So now if it's not Harrison, because you already got a small forward, maybe it's, addressing the backup center position. Maybe it's addressing another small forward or a guy like Naz Reid or something like that. And then on top of that, you would still have your room exception at 7.7 million bucks that you can go out and chase players. So again, I know some people just shut this off and they're like, oh, you're just talking too much about numbers. But it's still a fascinating discussion because this is where we're going into. It's very, very confusing about how the Kings plot forward, and one misstep, they could really hurt themselves. I mean, but that's not to say that, like, if they get to next summer and Domantas Sabonis has had another great season and he wants to be here, that they can't just sign him to an extension then. But giving him an extension now helps you like solidify the base of your franchise. All the cornerstones of your franchise are in place moving forward. And that would be a really good thing.
And as far-fetched as it might seem, that's Monty's bag.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't
Yeah.
it? Like that's what Monty does, is this type of stuff right here. So it may sound crazy to us, but Monty's like, no, this is easy.
Well, I mean, but I would even say, how crazy is it just in general? Like, if you're Domantas Sabonis and you can, like, I don't, you can tell me what the difference is, James, but if I could tomorrow secure $196 million deal, do I, like, what am I holding out for? 215? like it's not like I'm missing $100 million. Like, it's probably gonna be like 15 to $20 million where I could sign now and have 195 and then or sign next year and have 215. Why not just take the 195?
Yeah. So, and what we're talking about,
$1 million. That's why.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. And so what we're talking about, exactly what you're saying, like if he were to get a $5 million raise this summer and go up to 27 million, first of all, he got a $5 million raise for this season, right? So he's now making 27 versus 22. But on top of that, if you look at the total package, the 5-year package with next year's salary and then the 4-year extension, you really are looking at like 197.3 million bucks. And that's a lot of money for a 5-year deal. And if you blow out a knee or tear up a shoulder or the hand situation keeps coming back, like there are ways in which you could see that a player would want security over waiting until next offseason and hoping that at 27 going on 28 that he's still going to get that same kind of money. And not everybody is going to build a system around him like the Kings have.
This is going to be a fascinating thing to follow over the course of the next few days, Hammer. But it starts with the NBA draft tomorrow. We'll talk about that when our 1320 Kings insider James Ham returns with us here on D-Lo and KC, brought to you by Sky River Casino and Sacramento sports leader ESPN 1320. That was good stuff, James.
Yeah, man.
Good stuff.
I hope I like, it's really hard to explain some of it, but I'm trying to like make it as easily digestible as possible.
Oh, it's good stuff.
Yeah. So as of right now, I have them with 7 players under contract. If you add in Kessler Edwards, that gives him 8, and that puts him at 28.3 million. Then your 2023 first is a $2.7 million cap hold, so that drops you to 25.6. Then you have to make up for the 3 roster spots that you don't have. So that puts you at 22.3 from my book. And then again, if you can somehow find someone to take Rich, you'd have a $1.1 million another cap hold, but that would put you up to 33 million bucks. And now you're playing all kinds of fun stuff, because you can even, again, if you can pull off a trade where you're trading 2 players for the guy that you want, and you still have like 20 plus million in cap space, now it gets crazy. So, I mean, you could still bring back Harrison if you wanted to and have a 3 or 4 forward set with Harrison, or you can with Harrison, Keegan, if you got like OG and then Sasha Vezenkov, or you can address other needs like very quickly. So backup point guard, backup center, all those things. Another small forward, especially if you didn't have Harrison, you'd still have money to go chase a Nas Reed, or you'd still have money to go chase a Kelly Oubre.
Now we talking Nas Reed, Kelly Oubre. Now we talking.
Yeah.
All I'm hearing is championship. That's all I'm hearing.
Yeah. Well, that, and if you spend 22 million bucks in cap space and you spend 15 million, you still have 7 million to go back to Domas and say, hey, let's talk. So, and I don't know, like if I'm the Kings, I would prefer something more like a $5 million investment this year to bump his salary up, because like 38, 41, 44, and 40, almost 48 million. That's a lot of money. So, I mean, I think that's a lot of money for anyone. Anyone's going to look at that and go, okay, do I need that? Or do I need, the extra 19 million on the back end, or the extra 30 million, but but really hamstring what the Kings can do.
You just take all those numbers and you cut them in half.
Yeah. See, now people are bringing up
$100 million worth.
Bruce Brown. Like, how great would it be to, again, go out and make a move for a guy like OG, and then come back and be able to give Bruce Brown like a $10 or $12 million deal to add to what you're doing. And so next thing you know, Bruce Brown ain't coming here. You don't know. Like,
Bruce Brown isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. But the most they can give him is like $8.6 million. Yeah, they have a
6.
What's that?
He opted out of what, 6.8?
Yeah,
6 points.
6.6.
Yeah, but because of I don't know, there's something weird about his contract, so he can only get up to 8.6 million from.
So them. He can get more from another team than he can from Denver.
He can get more from anyone than he can from Denver.
That's fascinating.
Isn't that what's going on with the Lakers and Austin Reeves?
Someone said that earlier. I don't think so, but I thought that was the extension versus entering free agency. That's what I thought that was, but maybe that's completely wrong.
Yeah,
because I don't understand how Denver can only offer him much. But
I've heard both with Reeves. I've heard somebody explain to me like, no, they actually can give him whatever money he's looking for, and then some like, no, he actually can only.
Because if they can only offer him a certain amount, isn't it a foregone conclusion that he's gone?
Yeah, well, Bruce Brown, they can only offer him, I think it's 8.6 million, because they have no bird rights to him at all. He's only, he signed there last summer. So they don't even have early bird, which at least early bird, they could give him, close to mid-level money. It's around, early bird is around like $12 million. But they don't have that. Now, if they sign him to a 1 more year deal, and then they could go in later on and work on, getting him locked up on I think it's a 4-year 55 after that. But this first year, he's not going to make the big money. And someone said he's 6'4", but like Bruce Brown plays like he's 6'7". So
he's been guarding power forwards for the past 3 years.
Yeah, he's got a really nice ability to play up.
We're coming back, James. Hang on.
All right.
Yeah, I don't understand I don't understand cap rules. Like I don't get this. I'm reading Bruce Brown came up during the commercial break as we were talking over on YouTube and Twitch. If you're watching, hit the thumbs up and subscribe button. And then Austin Reeves' name came into this, and I'm still completely unclear as to how this. I'm unclear how this works. James, I don't understand this. I hate this. This is stupid. I just want to talk basketball. Give me how this generic contract stuff works. But the Lakers and what they can do with Austin Reeves and then what you just told us about Bruce Brown in Denver is so confusing to me.
Yeah, so Bruce Brown, because he signed a 2-year deal, but the second year was a player option, and he opted out of the player option. Mm-hmm. So if you're with the team for 2 years, you get early bird rights. It's what happened with Rashawn Holmes a handful of years ago. So you can sign one deal and then you're there for 2 years, and then early bird is very similar to a mid-level exception. So basically it's around like 11, 12 million bucks. That's a starting salary that you can start. But because he's only been there 1 year, they literally have no rights to him at all. So they have to play within their either their cap space or they have to use an exception. And it just depends on what exception they have. And so they're limited to paying him just 8.6 million bucks from what I've read. Now, if he takes that contract and he plays out this season, and he rolls the dice and he gets to next season, then he would have his early bird rights because he would have played for the team for 2 years. And then he could sign an extension, which is something like, he could sign an early bird, which would be like a 4-year, $55 million extension onto what he's doing. So there's even, like, I was reading today that, so in the new CBA, is the minute the finals game ends, you can start negotiating with your own free agents, right? On a free agent contract.
Mm-hmm.
That's the new rule. So they're trying to get around these things. Now,
A lot of people operating on that new rule right now.
there are, but check this out. I was reading up on it. You can't discuss free agency with your own free agents, but what you can, because they're under contract with you, is you could discuss the potential for an extension. As long as you're not using the terms free agency and you're using the words extension,
Oh, that's ridiculous.
then you can actually work under a different set of rules. And so that's how teams have been dealing with this for a while. So again, we've heard that like there were talks at one point with Harrison Barnes and the Kings, his people and the Kings. There may have been some numbers exchanged about a potential extension for his contract, not as a free agent.
Of course not.
But those conversations have cooled while the Kings are exploring a bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And there's potential that they will come back to that, but there may not have been a real strong feeling like about the number that was being bandied about. And so I don't think the Kings are like looking at the number in the same way that some of the people on the outside are. And they've got to explore all their options and make sure they're doing the right thing by their franchise and make sure that, you know, they can't get 5 years younger and a defensive second, all second defensive team player, something like that, even if it costs them some other things.
I think I finally understand this Austin Reeves thing.
Okay.
Because I finally found a term that I've seen before and I understand, and it's the poison pill. I understood the poison pill. So what happens is these are just examples. The Lakers have the early bird rights on Reeves, but because of the minimum contract, they can only offer him 4 years, $50 million. That's the max they can offer him.
Yeah.
If Houston, Orlando, whoever comes in, they can offer him a 4-year, $80 million contract. The Lakers can match that contract, but the first year of the contract, it will be on their books as $11.4 million. It'll be on their books the second year as $12.2. And then the last 2 years of his contract, Austin Reeves will be on the books for $27 million.
Yes.
And that's where teams go, we can't do that. We can't have Austin Reeves on the books for $27 million in 2 years.
Yeah, and whoever the team is that actually is signed this deal, they don't have that problem. They can they can spread the money out over the 4 years, but if they put the poison pill in the contract, then it's basically done. Yeah, it's tough.
Austin Reeves on the books for $27 million in 2025. Boy, that's amazing right there.
Yeah, some next level stuff.
Amazing. I don't read as much into guys opting out of contract. I just consider it a formality. I mean, Bruce Brown, the Bruce Brown situation with Denver is certainly interesting, but I just look at it like this is business. It's a formality. The Draymond Green stuff, I don't believe Draymond Green is going anywhere. It's just, it's part of the business of basketball. Or, as James Ham would say,
the business of basketball.
Thank you.
Yeah. And when it comes to Bruce Brown,
sorry. Sorry. We've added sound effects to our show, James.
That's amazing. When it comes to the Bruce Brown thing, once he opted out, you saw that Denver went out and traded for a couple of picks. They traded for the 29th and the 32nd. Man, there are some players who do what Bruce Brown does, sitting right around that range, and you could see where they may just be looking for a cheaper option because they have to. And there's, of course, there are players with all kinds of potential, but if smart teams, they look for the guy that does exactly what they want that guy to do, not a guy who you think could be something great, but if it doesn't work out, we'll try to convert him to this. That doesn't usually ever work out. So it's better if you see a guy that plays like Bruce Brown in the NBA draft and you think you can get him at a certain point, you might as well just draft that guy and hope that he develops and becomes the player that you think he can be.
Yeah. Is there any other guy out there? Because we talked about Tobias Harris a little bit, and how somebody ventured back 2 years ago and brought up Tobias Harris for the Kings. But I mean, is there anybody out there that you've seen that maybe hasn't been talked about as enough that might be somebody that the Kings have their eye on? We talked about Jaden McDaniels in Minnesota. and maybe trying to see if there's a way that the Kings can get him if Minnesota can't afford him. Is there kind of an under the radar guy, in your opinion, that hasn't been talked about that could be a real help for the Kings, a realistic target as well?
Yeah, you said Jaden McDaniels, right? Or Jalen?
Yeah, I always get confused. Which one's in Minnesota? Is that Jalen?
No, I think it's Jaden.
Jaden, I think. I like typically I'm not this far off with these guys, but
No.
the other one's in Charlotte, right?
No, the other one got traded to Philadelphia and is unrestricted free agent.
Jaden
is in Minnesota.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jalen is in Philadelphia, but unrestricted free agent going out into the world this summer.
He's sneaky, to be honest with you. I'm not mad at Jalen McDaniels either. He's not as good as Jaden, but I'm not mad at.
Yeah, I mean,
on him.
He had a really good season, but like that's a type of deal where like you're looking at a 9th, 10th guy and you're hoping that he develops into something, because as of right now, I mean, he had a nice like 40 game stretch with Charlotte, but before that he hadn't really done much. He's a good defender. I would go back to the, what is it? Robert, no, who's the guy? Glenn Robinson, the third.
Little dog.
That's kind of the style of player he is, or the level of player, a guy who put up stats one time and you're not quite sure if he's going to be able to put those up. Like the Kings could do what they tried to do at the trade deadline. They could go out and look at a Matisse Thybulle. They could look at Darius Baisley. You could, again, McDaniels. Like you could start accumulating those younger guys and see if one of them really pans out. There's even a couple of guys in the draft that look, that can do some of the Matisse Thybulle things, right? But like if I'm looking at Thybulle, then I got to look at Bruce Brown, because Bruce Brown basically does a lot of the Matisse Thybulle things on the defensive end, but he also can get you 12 points a game, and that's just different. He can stretch floor a little bit. He can stretch. He's got the ability to go up and attack the rim. So, I don't know. Like there are options the Kings have that are affordable options if everything falls through, or even if they don't. If you go and you do something like, sign Harrison Barnes to a deal starting at $15 million a year. You use $5 million on cap space to go out and bump up Sabonis' salary. And then you come back and you use the room exception and you got like $7.7 million, but you can split that over 2 or 3 contracts. You might be able to get Matisse Thybulle for $4 million. You might be able to get Darius Baisley for $3.5 million. And so now you can get 2 of those players and add them to what you're already doing. And that's where you're getting some more of that depth and stuff that you think you might need.
Shout out to our man Terrence, because this did cross my mind the other day. Terrence asked, is Matisse Thybulle just off the radar now? Yeah, Terrence, he went to Portland. And that's what happened. He just kind of, his season came to an end. And I think he's
basketball hell.
Wow. Congratulations, Portland. He's restricted, right? Is Matisse Thybulle restricted?
Yeah, I think he is.
Oh
no.
Oh, that's great. We got nothing out of it. Good.
No, I'm pretty sure he is restricted.
I thought he was too.
But I don't think that they're matching on much. There hasn't been a lot of chatter about him. There's been a lot of chatter about all these other guys that they're going to go out and chase. Someone brings up Derek Jones Jr. He's one of the first guys that this front office chased and decided to turn him down and go to Portland, and then got shipped to Chicago and like whatever. So
and he
like
opted out.
Yeah, he just opted out, and he's a guy that like just never figured it out, where Bruce Brown has figured it out. So the Kings are going to have options, but one of the problems that they have is that most of these options we're talking about, they should be looked at as 9, 10, 11, 12 on your roster options. Because if you're a team that's going to play in the top of the Western Conference and you hope to stay there, we're talking about the whole, like maintain and improve. Well, you maintain by bringing everybody back. You improve by maybe being able to add a couple of these guys that we're talking about. Even like go back to the Mason Plumlee idea. You could maybe go offer Mason Plumlee a $7-8 million contract and get the backup center that you need. But I think that there's just a lot of ways in which you can build this team. But you have to keep in mind that the Kings are no longer a team that goes out and signs Glenn Robinson III as like one of their primary free agent acquisitions in an offseason. They can't be that team anymore. If they want to maintain and improve, they have to do things that actually improve the club. And that means being aggressive and going out there and getting players that you can moneyball here and there and find cheap options as backups, but you've got to have frontline starters at every position. And that's something that, I think that they're going to have to go in and take care of this offseason.
One of the things we talked about today, James, is the idea, the thought that, we talk a lot about this roster and what we want to do going in the next season and free agents and trades and stuff like that. And one of the guys that we kind of overlook, in my opinion, is Terrence Davis. And you guys know we love Terrence Davis here. We'd love to have him back. He was a guy, regardless of what you think of him, and there's a lot of like he couldn't get off the bench. He didn't play 6-7 straight games. We get all that. But in the biggest game of the year, with the season on the line, Mike Brown went to him. He played well, and he helped keep your season alive. I think he's somebody that you can use moving forward. You can have moving forward. What do you think about the idea of him coming back? Is that realistic for both sides? Maybe for the Kings, but not for Terrence. Like, what's your thoughts about him coming back?
Yeah, I mean, I think Terrence is still interesting, and I actually don't think he'll get $4 million a year like he did last year. I think basically because of his up and down tenure here in the last 2 years with the Kings, he's going to get something more like the league minimum. And I mean, again, that's not that bad. He's a guy who basically made the league out of I don't even think he was drafted, but the problem that he has is that you're big game hunting if you're the Sacramento Kings, and he's not going to be part of like the first wave or the second wave of free agency when it comes to the Sacramento Kings. And if he's back, that's possible, but you also have to remember they have, the 24th pick and the 38th pick, and they might be able to get players that can replace those minutes. It's possible that Keon Ellis could replace some of those minutes that they got from Terrence last year. And while they might not be as exciting and might not have the athleticism or the crazy fun side that is Terrence Davis, that's kind of the NBA. You have to do what you have, you have to improve your roster. This roster, like from top to bottom, the top was really good. The bottom had some major question marks. You got a guy like Dellavedova who's already gone to the ABL and who, hadn't been in the league. And while he was a good leader and he fit a role, like this roster needs to be good all the way up and down the roster because that's the type of team that they're becoming. They're a team who's at the top of the Western Conference. And let's be honest, they got lucky last season. Like, did they have players fight through injuries? Yes. Did they do everything in their ability to avoid injury? Yes. Did the training staff have them in great shape and all that stuff? Sure, we can do all of those things. But they really didn't have like a catastrophic injury or a 6-week injury. Their real depth was never tested. It wasn't. And so you hope that continues, but being realistic, you're lucky that was the case and that you didn't have, like De'Aaron Fox was in great shape 3 years ago and rolled his ankle at a practice right before like the 10th game of the season and missed 7 weeks. Like those things happen. They happen all the time and they happen to every other NBA team this season. They just didn't really happen to the Sacramento Kings. So I think Sacramento needs to be cognizant of that, and they can't walk into next season with a bench that might be a little more suspect than it really looked on paper. And you didn't have to use it the way that most of the time people have to use benches.
All right, James, enough is enough. Who are the Kings drafting tomorrow?
Man, I wish I knew. Like they've been locked down. Like getting any information from the actual team itself has been very difficult at this point. Like I'll tell you that I still like if somehow Leonard Miller falls to them, that's a dream. And somehow he didn't get invited into the green room, which I'm not sure what's going on there. He's from the G League Ignite. And in most situations, like most mocks have him in the top like 15 to 20. I still love Trace Jackson Davis. I think he's a perfect backup center fit with Domantas Sabonis, with the potential to play a little 4 alongside him down the road if he improves as a 3-point shooter or decides to take 3-point shots. Olivier Maxence Prosper, still love him as a prospect. He's moving up a lot of draft boards. There is a good amount of talent at number 24. I just don't think the Kings are a team that want to take flyers on people that they don't have any idea what they're going to be. So there's a big group of players that are like just pure prospects, just gold mining out there. And you hope that you strike gold. There's also another group that you know who they are, you know what they've done. They have a proven track record and they're worth the gamble at 24. And so again, I would love to tell you I have a good beat on who they're drafting. But like I have the guys I would like, and then I mirror those to what I think the team sort of likes, what they have done in the past and what their needs are. And I think that there's a lot of talent there. They can really improve their team. And I wouldn't look, they could use it on a shooting guard. They could use it on a 2-3. Then people will go, why are you doing that? And it's because of the question you just asked about Terrence Davis. And, they've got to fill that void because he's not going to be there. And they might need a guy who come off the bench and add a spark at the 2. So I think that they are going to be open to all kinds of different things, but still going to be open to moving a pick, whether it's a big, huge deal or a smaller deal. This is a team that's really good. And again, a $2.7 million cap hold for the 24th pick. It's pretty high. And you can, if you need to bump down and go to a, league minimum player for that, it does clear up cap space when you're trying to make moves and trying to do other things.
Well, you heard it right there. Kings taking Amani Bates. Just as Kenny wants. Kings taking Amani Bates.
Hey, and someone brings up Chris Murray too. Like I love Chris Murray. I think Chris Murray would be a really good pick. Whitehead is a really interesting pick.
The Chris Murray thing is fascinating, and I don't think it has anything to do with Chris the player. It's fans are so split on him because it feels like, okay, you're just drafting Keegan's brother. Like, why do we need to do that? And then there are other people like, no, he's like good. He can play. Like it's
not
the same human being. It's a different player. You have 2 good ball players now. And I just think the Murray name, and I do think it is magnified by the fact they're identical twins. I think that is like annoyed a certain group of Kings fans.
Well, I mean, I compare him to he looks a little bit, his movement, the way he plays, to Thaddeus Young, right? That to me is a good player comp, but you cannot get away from the other player comp, which is Keegan Murray with a left hand. You just can't. I mean, it's just like when you're looking at the Martin twins. The Martin twins are the same size, same wingspan. Like their games are different, but they're not that different. The same thing about who were the other the one that just got traded.
Morris twins.
Yeah, the Morris twins. Like they're still basic concept, same player. Like
how many
whether
sets
one
of
is
twins
better.
are going to be in the NBA.
Well, I was just
year?
about to ask the question: which sets of twins can you separate from, like that do look different? They were brothers. I was about to say Gerald and Dominique, but they're brothers, not twins.
Yeah, they were just brothers. Yeah. So the Lopez twins. Yeah, those
different.
two. That might be the they are so different. One of them shoots threes. The other one is was a super defender forever, and then the other one took over, is now the much better defensive player.
Then you got the Thompson twins at the top of the draft. It's going to be like 10 sets of twins in the NBA next year. Like every team is there's going to be every game is going to be playing a brother somewhere.
Wild.
Goodness gracious. That's amazing.
Amazing.
Brooke and Robin Lopez. That's
probably the ones.
You can differentiate those two. No problem.
Oh, yeah.
No problem. Well, it'll be a fun next 28 hours or so, and then the countdown to free agency will begin. I'm excited to see what the Sacramento Kings do tomorrow. I'm excited to see how the draft unfolds.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see what happens.
There's a lot going on.
I'm excited to see what happens at 2. I'm excited to see what happens at 3. I'm excited to see how quickly Chris Haynes tweets after the number 3 pick is selected.
Zion gonna be a Pelican tomorrow?
According to Bill Simmons, he's not. At least not by the end of the night. He's not. Bill Simmons.
Gonna be a Pelican.
Zion going to be a Trailblazer tomorrow?
Yes.
Oh, man.
I think it happens.
Oh, man.
That's so tough.
Oh, man. Okay. We're done. We're ending on that note. Zion Williamson, the Trailblazer.